Ein hammered against the tall windows of Russo Manor as another expensive medical machine crashed onto the marble floor. The sound echoed through the mansion. Every servant outside the bedroom lowered their heads. Nobody moved. Nobody dared enter. Inside the room, Adrian Russo sat in a customized black wheelchair, his blue eyes burning with anger. Only 6 months earlier, he had been the most feared mafia boss in New York. Powerful businessmen stood when he entered a room. Rival families avoided saying his name. Now, he couldn't even stand on his own. A sniper's bullet during an ambush had shattered part of his spine. The world's best surgeons had saved his life, but they couldn't promise he would ever walk again. Adrian hated sympathy more than pain. 3 personal nurses had already resigned. 2 physical therapists had walked out after he refused treatment. 1 doctor had quietly admitted, "Mr. Russo, if you continue refusing therapy, you'll never recover." Adrian had stared at him coldly. "Get out." The doctor never returned. Outside the room, Marco, Adrian's lifelong friend and head of security, rubbed his forehead in frustration. "We can't keep losing medical staff." The mansion's elderly butler, William, sighed. "No one can handle him anymore." Marco looked toward the hallway. "What about the new nurse?" William hesitated. "She arrived 10 minutes ago." Marco frowned. "And she's waiting downstairs." Marco nodded. "Send her in." Emma Brooks stood quietly in the entrance hall, clutching a small medical bag against her chest. She wore a simple light blue nurse's uniform, white sneakers, and her long dark brown hair was tied into a neat ponytail. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't thin. She was a plus-size woman who had spent her entire life hearing strangers judge her before she ever spoke. Growing up, classmates laughed at her. Patients sometimes requested another nurse. Even hospital administrators often overlooked her for promotions. But one thing no one could question was her heart. Emma had become a nurse because her mother had died waiting for someone to care. She had promised herself no patient would ever feel abandoned again. William approached her politely. "Miss Brooks." She smiled. "Yes. The boss isn't easy. I've read his file." William shook his head gently. "The medical file tells you about his injuries. It doesn't tell you about his temper." Emma smiled softly. "I've dealt with difficult patients before." William almost laughed. "You've never met Adrian Russo?" Marco opened the massive bedroom doors. "Boss, the new nurse is here." Adrian didn't even look up from the rain outside. "I already fired her." Marco sighed. "You haven't even met her." "I don't need to. I don't need another stranger pretending to care." Emma stepped inside anyway. She closed the door quietly behind her. "Good evening, Mr. Russo." Silence. Adrian slowly turned his wheelchair toward her. His cold eyes scanned her from head to toe. "You should leave." Emma calmly placed her medical bag on a nearby table. "My shift doesn't end for another 12 hours. I said leave." She looked directly into his eyes. "My supervisor told me you're recovering from spinal trauma. I'm here to help." "I don't need help." "You do." Marco's eyebrows lifted. William looked shocked. No one spoke to Adrian like that. For a long moment, neither of them blinked. Finally, Adrian smirked. "You're either brave or incredibly foolish." Emma smiled. "My patients usually say both." The room fell quiet again. Emma carefully checked the medical chart beside Adrian's bed. She noticed several unopened medication bottles, physical therapy schedules, ignored, pain medication, skipped, doctor's recommendations, untouched. She looked back at him. "You haven't been following treatment," Adrian answered without emotion. "Correct." "Why?" "Because I don't enjoy wasting time." Emma folded her arms. "Getting better isn't wasting time." He looked away. "I'm not getting better." She walked closer. "You don't know that." "I do." "You've already given up." His jaw tightened. "I don't remember asking for your opinion." "No." "You asked for a nurse." "I didn't ask for anyone." Emma smiled gently. "Then blame Marco." Marco immediately raised both hands. "Don't drag me into this." For the first time in weeks, a tiny smile almost appeared on Adrian's face. Almost. Later that evening, Emma prepared fresh bandages for Adrian's shoulder wound. The bullet injury had healed badly. She approached carefully. I need to change your dressing. Adrian's voice became cold again. I'll do it myself. He reached awkwardly toward the wound. His injured arm trembled. The bandage slipped onto the floor. Emma quietly picked it up. Without saying a word, she knelt beside his wheelchair. Please. Let me help. Adrian stared at her. Most people looked at him with pity. Others looked afraid. Emma looked at him, like he was simply another patient. Nothing more. Nothing less. Slowly, he moved his arm aside. Emma carefully cleaned the wound. Her movements were gentle, professional. She never rushed. She never flinched at the scars covering his back. After several minutes, she finished. There. Much better. Adrian looked surprised. It didn't hurt. She smiled. It wasn't supposed to. That night, Marco entered Adrian's office. So, Adrian continued reading business reports. So what? The nurse. Adrian remained silent. Finally, she talks too much. Marco laughed. But Adrian hesitated. She doesn't lie. Marco smiled knowingly. I told you. She's different. The next morning, Emma wheeled Adrian toward the mansion garden. Fresh morning sunlight filled the air. Birds sang from nearby trees. Adrian frowned. I never asked to come outside. Emma kept pushing the wheelchair. I know. You've been locked inside this room for months. So today you're seeing the sun. He looked annoyed. You enjoy giving orders. She laughed. No. I enjoy helping stubborn people. Adrian rolled his eyes. You've only been here one day. And you've already decided what kind of man I am. Emma stopped the wheelchair beside a beautiful fountain. She walked around and faced him. No. I've decided what kind of pain you're carrying. For the first time, his confident expression cracked. She wasn't talking about his legs. She was talking about something much deeper. Before Adrian could answer, a luxury black sedan entered the front gates. Marco's expression immediately changed. He checked the security monitor on his phone. His face darkened. Boss. Adrian looked toward him. What is it? Marco lowered his voice. Your cousin Victor just arrived. Adrian's eyes turned ice cold. He wasn't invited. Marco nodded. I know. Emma noticed the sudden tension. Who's Victor? Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared toward the approaching car, then quietly whispered, the one man who has been waiting for me to stay in this wheelchair forever. Victor Russo stepped out of the black luxury sedan with the confidence of a man who believed the future already belonged to him. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, polished black shoes, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Two bodyguards followed a few steps behind. Marco immediately signaled the security team to remain alert. Emma stood quietly behind Adrian's wheelchair, sensing the tension before a single word had been spoken. Victor spread his arms as he approached. Adrian, my dear cousin, it's good to see you're still alive. His words sounded polite. His tone sounded disappointed. Adrian's expression remained completely emotionless. You came without permission. Victor chuckled. I didn't think family needed an invitation. Adrian looked directly into his eyes. You stopped being family a long time ago. For several seconds, neither man blinked. Emma could almost feel the hatred between them. Victor finally looked toward her. And who is this? A new nurse? His eyes slowly traveled over Emma before a mocking smile appeared. I see you've lowered your standards. Emma had heard comments like that her entire life. Normally, she ignored them, but before she could respond, Adrian spoke first. Watch your mouth. Victor raised an eyebrow. You've changed. You've never defended employees before. Adrian answered calmly. She works for me. That means no one insults her. Emma looked at Adrian in surprise. It was the first time anyone had defended her so naturally. Victor noticed the look they exchanged. Interesting. Very interesting. He smiled to himself. Perhaps this nurse could become useful. Later that afternoon, Victor and Adrian sat alone inside the mansion library. Emma remained outside, organizing medical supplies while Marco stood nearby. Through the partially open door, raised voices became impossible to ignore. Victor leaned against the fireplace. The board is worried. Adrian didn't even look up from the documents on his desk. The board works for me. Victor folded his arms. Not anymore. They're beginning to question whether a man in a wheelchair can still lead. Silence. Victor slowly walked closer. You know, if you retired, I could carry the family business. Adrian finally looked up. His icy blue eyes locked onto Victor. So that's why you're here. Victor smiled. I'm offering help. No. You're waiting for me to die. The room fell silent. Victor's smile disappeared. You always were dramatic. He turned and walked toward the door. As he passed Emma, he stopped beside her. You won't be working here long. Emma looked confused. Excuse me? Victor smiled politely. Nobody stays. Then he walked away. Emma watched him leave. Something about him felt wrong. Very wrong. That evening, Emma prepared Adrian's physical therapy equipment inside the rehabilitation room. Parallel bars, balance supports, resistance bands. Everything remained exactly where the doctors had left it months ago. And used. She turned toward Adrian. We're starting today. Adrian remained seated in his wheelchair. No. Emma crossed her arms. You promised your doctors you'd try. I lied. You've been lying to yourself. Marco quietly left the room. He knew better than to interrupt. Emma stepped closer. I know you're afraid. Adrian's voice hardened. I'm afraid of nothing. Then stand. His jaw tightened. You know I can't. No. I know you haven't tried. For several moments, neither of them moved. Finally, Adrian placed both hands on the wheelchair arms. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself upward. His legs trembled violently. His breathing became heavier. Emma remained beside him, but didn't touch him. You can do it. Another inch. Another painful second. Then suddenly, his right leg collapsed. Adrian fell forward. Emma caught him before he hit the floor. Both of them landed together. For a moment, neither spoke. Adrian closed his eyes. I told you. Emma looked directly at him. No. You proved something. What? You stood. His eyes opened. It was only for a second. She smiled. Yesterday, it was 0 seconds. Tomorrow, we'll make it 2. For the first time in months. Hope quietly entered Adrian's heart. Over the following days, a routine slowly developed. Every morning, Emma brought him coffee. Every afternoon, she forced him through painful therapy sessions. Every evening, she changed his bandages and checked his medication. She never treated him like a helpless man. She treated him like someone capable of fighting again. Even the mansion staff noticed the difference. William whispered to Marco one afternoon. The boss laughed today. Marco nearly dropped his coffee. I haven't heard that in 6 months. One rainy evening, Emma finished organizing Adrian's medicine cabinet. As she reached for a bottle on the top shelf, she slipped. Before she could fall, a strong hand caught her wrist. She looked down. Adrian was holding her arm. He had leaned forward farther than he ever had before. She smiled. You saved me. Adrian released her hand slowly. I couldn't let my nurse get injured. Emma laughed. So that's all I am? He looked away. No. Before he could finish, another nurse entered the room carrying fresh medical supplies. Mr. Russo. The night shift starts now. Emma stepped back politely. My shift is over. The new nurse smiled warmly. I'll take over. She reached toward Adrian's shoulder. The moment her hand touched him, Adrian's entire expression changed. His voice became cold enough to freeze the room. Don't. The nurse froze. I'm sorry, I said. Don't touch me. Everyone in the room looked confused. Even Emma. The nurse slowly stepped back. I was only trying to help. Adrian turned his head toward Emma. His eyes softened for the first time that day. Then, in a deep voice that echoed through the silent room, he said, She's the only one allowed to touch me. Emma's heartbeat stopped. The room became completely silent. Marco looked up from the doorway. William nearly dropped the tray he was carrying. Even the other nurse stared in disbelief. Emma whispered, "Mr. Russo." He interrupted her without taking his eyes off hers.
No, Adrian.
Then, almost quietly, he added, "Because you're the only person in this house who still treats me like I'm worth saving." Emma felt tears fill her eyes. She had come to the mansion believing she was simply another nurse. She never imagined she would become the one person the ruthless Mafia boss trusted more than anyone else. But neither of them realized. Outside the mansion gates, Victor Russo sat inside his parked car, watching through binoculars. A slow smile spread across his face. So, the nurse is his weakness. He picked up his phone and made a call. "Get ready. If we can't destroy Adrian, we'll destroy the woman he refuses to live without." Victor Russo slowly lowered the binoculars and smiled. So, the nurse is his weakness. For 6 months, Adrian had trusted no one. He refused doctors, ignored therapists, pushed away every servant who tried to help. Then Emma Brooks arrived, and within only a few weeks, she had become the only person Adrian allowed near him. Victor knew exactly how to destroy a powerful man. You didn't attack his empire. You attacked the person he refused to lose. The following evening, rain covered the city once again. Emma finished Adrian's evening therapy session. "You stood for almost 10 seconds today." She smiled proudly. "That's progress." Adrian leaned back in his wheelchair, exhausted. "I only managed because you wouldn't let me quit." Emma laughed softly. "I've learned something about you." "And what's that?" "You're impossible." A rare smile appeared on Adrian's face. "So I've been told." Just then, Marco rushed into the therapy room. His expression was serious. "Boss, our perimeter cameras just went offline." Adrian immediately understood. "Victor." Marco nodded. "We believe so." Before another word could be spoken, the mansion lights suddenly went out. Everything became dark. Emma instinctively stepped closer to Adrian. Emergency lights switched on seconds later, covering the hallways in dim red light. Security alarms echoed throughout the estate. Marco spoke into his radio. "All teams report." Only static answered. "They're jamming our communications." Adrian's expression turned cold. "They're already inside." Outside, masked gunmen quietly surrounded the mansion. Security guards exchanged gunfire across the gardens. Windows shattered. Servants screamed while running toward safe rooms. Emma looked toward Adrian. "What do we do?" He calmly unlocked the wheels of his chair. "You leave." "I'm not leaving you. This isn't a request." She shook her head. "You spent weeks learning to trust me. I'm not abandoning you now." Before Adrian could argue, 2 armed men burst through the therapy room doors. One pointed his weapon directly at Emma. "There she is." The nurse. Emma froze. The second man smiled. "The boss wants her alive." Without hesitation, Adrian pushed his wheelchair forward, placing himself between Emma and the attackers. "Touch her." His voice dropped into the terrifying growl that had once ruled an entire criminal empire. "And you'll never leave this house." The gunman laughed. "What are you going to do? Run after us?" One of them stepped toward Emma. That single movement changed everything. Something inside Adrian snapped. Months of anger, pain, helplessness, all exploded at once. Using every ounce of strength left in his body, he grabbed the arms of the wheelchair. He pushed upward. His legs trembled violently. Pain shot through his spine. Emma gasped. Adrian, slowly, shaking uncontrollably. He stood. The gunman stopped smiling. For the first time in 6 months, Adrian Russo was standing. Only for a few seconds, but he was standing. The attackers stared in disbelief. Adrian took one painful step forward, then another. His breathing became heavier. His legs screamed with pain. But he never looked away from the men threatening Emma. "You wanted to know?" he said quietly. "If I could still stand." He took one final step. "Now you have your answer." At that exact moment, Marco and the security team stormed into the room. Within seconds, Both attackers were disarmed and thrown to the floor. Marco looked at Adrian, then froze. "Boss, you're standing." Emma rushed forward just as Adrian's strength gave out. He collapsed into her arms. She gently helped him back into the wheelchair. Tears streamed down her face. "You did it." Adrian smiled weakly. "No, we did." An hour later, Victor Russo was captured while trying to escape through the rear gardens. His hands were tied behind his back as security guards brought him before Adrian. Victor looked shocked. "You actually stood." Adrian calmly looked at him. "You spent months convincing everyone I'd never walk again." Victor laughed bitterly. "You were supposed to lose everything." "I almost did," Adrian answered. "But then someone reminded me why I should keep fighting." He looked toward Emma. Victor finally understood. "It was never about your legs. It was her." Adrian nodded once. "Yes." Marco escorted Victor away. This time, forever. 4 months later, Russo Manor looked completely different. The rehabilitation room had become Adrian's favorite place. Every morning, Emma stood beside him as he practiced walking with only a cane. Doctors called it a miracle. Adrian called it determination. Emma called it stubbornness. One sunny afternoon, she helped him walk through the mansion garden. Halfway across the path, Adrian suddenly stopped. Emma looked worried. "Does something hurt?" He smiled.
No.
He slowly reached into his jacket pocket, then knelt carefully on one knee. Emma covered her mouth in shock. "You shouldn't be kneeling." "I've spent months learning to stand again." He smiled warmly. "I wanted to use it for something important." He opened a small velvet box. Inside rested a simple diamond ring. "Emma Brooks, you walked into this house as my nurse. You became my reason to fight. You reminded me that strength isn't measured by power, but by the people who refuse to leave your side." His voice softened. "I don't need someone to take care of me anymore. I need someone to spend my life with." Emma couldn't stop crying. She laughed through her tears. "You really are impossible." Adrian smiled. "I know." She gently nodded. "Yes. I'll marry you." Applause erupted around them. Marco, William, the mansion staff, even the doctors clapped with tears in their eyes. Months later, their wedding took place in the mansion garden. As Emma walked toward Adrian, she remembered the frightened nurse who had entered this house believing she was just another employee. She never imagined she'd become the woman who healed a broken heart. And Adrian, the ruthless mafia boss feared across the country, finally understood that the greatest victory of his life wasn't rebuilding his empire. It wasn't defeating his enemies. It wasn't even learning to walk again. His greatest victory was finding the one woman who stayed beside him when he believed he had nothing left to offer. As they exchanged rings, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "You're still the only one allowed to touch me." Emma smiled through happy tears. "Then don't ever push me away again." Hand in hand, they walked forward together, not because life had become easy, but because they had chosen to face every challenge side by side. The ruthless mafia boss feared across the country, finally understood that the greatest victory of his life wasn't rebuilding his empire. It wasn't defeating his enemies. It wasn't even learning to walk again. His greatest victory was finding the one woman who stayed beside him when he believed he had nothing left to offer. As they exchanged rings, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "You're still the only one allowed to touch me." Emma smiled through happy tears. "Then don't ever push me away again." Hand in hand, they walked forward together, not because life had become easy, but because they had chosen to face every challenge side by side.